Some things are not buried to be forgotten, but to bind them in chains of shadow, for when they stir, they call your name through the dark, and they will not stop until you answer. In the desolate reaches of Blackthorn Cove, where the sea clawed at cliffs like a beast tearing flesh, the beacon stood as a relic of forgotten purpose. Once a lighthouse guiding ships through treacherous waters, its flame had long guttered out, leaving a skeletal tower of rusted iron and shattered glass. The locals spoke of it in hushed tones, calling it the beacon, though it no longer lit the way. They said it hungered, they said it saw. They told of a cloth within its lantern room, a tattered, stained thing that moved without wind, that whispered names in the night. Mira and Tom, urban explorers drawn to the macabre, arrived at the cove under a sky bruised with storm clouds. The air was thick with salt, damp with decay, and laced with a sour reek, like milk gone bad or blood left to congeal. Tom, lean and cocky, carried a crowbar, a flashlight, and a smirk that dared the world to scare him. Mira, quieter, her eyes sharp as broken glass, clutched a battered notebook filled with sketches of abandoned places and cryptic notes from old archives. They'd come for the cloth, chasing rumors of its curse. A shipwreck in 1947, a keeper who vanished without a trace, sailors who climbed the tower and returned changed hollow-eyed, hands stained black, muttering about a cloth that breathed. "It's just a ghost story," Tom scoffed, kicking a stone into the churning surf. "Some old sail, probably. Locals love their spooky bullshit." Mira didn't reply. She'd spent weeks in the town's library, poring over brittle diaries and yellowed letters. One account, scrawled in a trembling hand, described the cloth as alive, its threads woven from the screams of the drowned. Another spoke of a keeper who tried to burn it, only to be found days later, his body twisted, his face frozen in a scream. Mira felt it now, a pull, like a fishhook lodged in her chest, drawing her toward the beacon. The tower loomed ahead, its silhouette jagged against the gray sky. Its door hung ajar, the hinges shrieking as Tom forced it open. Inside, the air was heavy, damp with the stench of rot and something sharper, metallic, like blood or rust. The spiral staircase curled upward, its iron steps groaning under their weight, each creak echoing like a warning. Tom's flashlight cut through the gloom, revealing walls slick with mold, streaked with stains that looked too much like handprints. Mira's pulse pounded, louder than the waves crashing outside. She sketched the staircase in her notebook, her pencil trembling. Halfway up, they found a room, its door splintered, as if clawed open. Inside, rusted chains hung from the ceiling, swaying slightly, though no breeze stirred the air. Tom laughed, but it was brittle, his bravado cracking. "What's this, some old torture chamber?" Mira's flashlight caught something etched into the wall. Names, dozens of them, carved in jagged letters. Some were fresh, others worn smooth by time. At the bottom, a single word, "Watches." Her skin prickled. "We shouldn't be here," she whispered. "Relax," Tom said, but his voice shook. He swung his crowbar at a chain, the clang reverberating. The air grew colder, the stench stronger. Mira swore she heard a sound, a low, wet rasp, like breath through ruined lungs. They pressed on, climbing higher. The lantern room at the top was a hollow, doubt skull, its windows shattered, letting in the howl of the sea. In the center, suspended from a rusted hook, hung the cloth. It was gray, tattered, its edges frayed like gnawed flesh. Dark stains bloomed across it, shifting in the dim light blotches that might have been oil or blood or something worse. It swayed, though the air was still, its motion hypnotic, deliberate. Tom froze, his flashlight trembling. "That's not normal." Mira couldn't look away. The cloth seemed to pulse, its stains coiling into shapes. Hands reaching, eyes staring, mouths gaping. She saw a face or the hint of one, its features smeared but alive, watching her. Her notebook slipped from her fingers, pages fluttering to the floor. "Tom, we need to go." He didn't listen. "It's just a rag," he muttered, stepping closer, crowbar raised. "I'm cutting it down." "No." Mira lunged, but too late. The crowbar grazed the cloth, and the room screamed, not sound, but pressure, a crushing weight that drove them to their knees, blood trickling from their noses. The cloth writhed, its stains spreading like ink in water, forming new shapes, twisted limbs, clawing fingers, faces frozen in agony. The whispers came then, not in their ears but in their bones, a chorus of voices chanting names: Mira's, Tom's, and others, ancient and anguished. Tom's eyes went blank, his flashlight falling, its beam stuttering out. In the dark, the cloth glowed, a sickly phosphorescence. It slithered from its hook, moving like a living thing, sliding across the floor toward Tom. He didn't move, didn't scream, but his eyes gawed. His eyes were alive with terror, trapped as the cloth wrapped around his legs, climbing his body like a vine. It enveloped his chest, his arms, his face, until he was a gray, shapeless mass, twitching faintly. Mira scrambled back, her hands slipping on the slick floor. The whispers grew louder, clawing at her mind, promising to keep her, to weave her into the cloth. She stumbled down the stairs, the tower groaning as if alive, its walls pulsing with the same rhythm as the cloth's glow. Chains rattled in the dark, and she swore she saw shapes, figures, half-formed, reaching from the walls. She burst through the door, collapsing on the cliff's edge, the sea roaring below. Her hands were stained black, her notebook gone. When she dared look back, the beacon was silent, its windows dark. No Tom, no cloth, just the tower watching, waiting. Days later, the locals found Mira on the shore, her hair streaked white, her eyes unfocused. She clutched a single page torn from her notebook, covered in frantic sketches of a cloth with too many eyes, too many mouths. She didn't speak, didn't need to. The locals knew the beacon's hunger. They burned her clothes, scrubbed her hands, but the black stains lingered, like ink seeping into her skin. In the lantern room, the cloth hung still, its stains darker, its folds heavier. A new name whispered through its threads, joining the chorus of the lost. And the beacon stood, as it always had, waiting for the next to answer its call. Story 2. Shadows on the cliff wall. The wind didn't just howl, it carved her name into the night, a chilling summons that woke the shadows on the cliffwalk, their hungry whispers rising from the abyss to claim her soul. The cliffs of Dunhaven were a wound in the earth, a jagged scar where the land dropped into the churning Atlantic. The cliffwalk, a treacherous path etched into the rock, was shunned by locals after dusk. They spoke of it in hushed tones, calling it the Whispering Drop, where the wind carried voices from the void, voices that knew your name, your fears, your secrets. Over decades, dozens had vanished there, hikers seeking adventure, lovers chasing romance, even children straying too far from home. No bodies were ever found, only whispers of their fates etched in the town's folklore. Clara Vance, a journalist with a career teetering on collapse, saw the cliffwalk as her salvation. The string of disappearances had caught the eye of her editor at the Coastal Herald, and she'd fought for the assignment, desperate to prove herself. Armed with a flashlight, a digital recorder, and a notebook, she ignored the warnings scrawled in the town's collective memory. At the Rusty Anchor pub, the bartender, a grizzled man named Tom, had fixed her with a stare as he poured her whiskey. "Stay off the cliffwalk at night, girl. It don't give back what it takes." Clara had smirked, chalking it up to small town superstition. She'd faced worse than ghost stories in her 5 years chasing leads. The moon was a sickly crescent, half drowned in clouds as Clara stepped onto the cliffwalk at 10 p.m. The air was heavy, laced with salt and a sour tang, like something rotting just out of sight. The path was narrower than she'd imagined, barely 2 feet wide, with a sheer drop to the ocean on one side and a wall of jagged rock on the other. Her flashlight beam cut through the dark, catching flecks of quartz that glinted like watching eyes. The waves below roared, a primal hunger in their rhythm, and the wind sliced through her jacket, cold as a blade. She'd walked half a mile when the wind changed. It didn't gust, it spoke, a low, guttural murmur forming her name, Clara. She froze, her pulse a hammer in her chest. The sound came again, not from above but from below, rising from the black abyss where the waves churned. She aimed her flashlight over the edge, its beam swallowed by mist and spray. "Who's there?" she called, her voice thin against the wind's growl. The echo returned, warped into a hiss, as if the cliff itself mocked her. Clara shook her head, muttering about stress and imagination. She pressed on, her boots crunching on loose gravel. The path twisted, and her light caught something carved into the rock wall, a figure, humanoid but wrong, its limbs too long, its head featureless save for hollow sockets where eyes should be. The carving seemed to pulse under her beam, its edges blurring as if straining to break free. She stepped back, her heel grazing the cliff's edge. The drop yawned behind her, a hungry maw. Clara. The whisper was louder now, inside her mind, slithering through her thoughts like oil. She spun, sweeping her flashlight across the path. Nothing, but the shadows moved, stretching, coiling, peeling from the rocks like living things. They weren't cast by her light or the moon. They were born of the darkness itself, writhing with purpose. One shadow rose, its form sharpening into claws, a gaping mouth that pulsed with a faint, sickly glow. It lunged. Clara bolted, the path crumbling beneath her. Stones skittered into the void, their clatter lost in the ocean's roar. The shadows pursued, their whispers swelling into a cacophony, names, not just hers, but countless others. A litany of the lost woven into shrieks of rage and despair. Her flashlight flickered, its beam stuttering as if the darkness fought back. She tripped, the light tumbling from her hand and over the edge, plunging into the sea. The world went black, but not silent. The whispers grew, a chorus of anguish, and in the dim moonlight, she saw them. Figures, not shadows now, but bodies twisted, broken, climbing from the drop. Their limbs bent at impossible angles, their faces hollow, mouths stretched in silent screams. Some wore tattered remnants of clothing, jackets, dresses, a child's shoe dangling from a skeletal foot. Their eyes empty as the carvings fixed on her. Clara scrambled to her feet, her breath ragged, and ran. The path narrowed further, the rock wall pressing closer, its surface crawling with more carvings, each one alive, reaching for her with stone fingers. She reached a fork in the path, a detail missing from the maps she'd studied. One branch veered inland toward a dense thicket of gnarled trees. The other hugged the cliff, descending toward a cove where the waves glowed faintly, as if lit from below. The whispers urged her downward, their tone almost pleading. Against her better judgment, she followed, drawn by a pull she couldn't explain. The path grew slick, coated in a slimy moss that smelled of decay. Her boots slipped, and she caught herself on the rock wall, her hand brushing a carving that burned ice, cold against her skin. At the cove, the air was wrong, too still, too heavy, like breathing through wet cloth. The water shimmered, not with moonlight, but with a sickly green phosphorescence. Shapes moved beneath the surface, not fish but something humanoid, their forms distorted by the waves. The whispers were deafening now, a chorus of voices screaming her name, begging, threatening. She turned to flee, but the path was gone, replaced by a wall of shadows that pulsed like a heartbeat. A figure emerged from the water, its body half formed, dripping with glowing ooze. It wore Clara's face, but wrong. Eyes too large, mouth too wide, teeth sharp as needles. You came, it said, its voice a blend of hers and the whispers. You belong. More figures rose, each wearing a face from the town's missing. A hiker, a lover, a child, all warped into something ancient, ravenous. They reached for her, their touch burning and freezing at once. Clara screamed, stumbling back. The cliff gave way, and she fell not into water, but into darkness, a void where the whispers became a roar. She woke on the cliffwalk, dawn breaking over the horizon. Her notebook lay beside her, its pages filled with words she hadn't written. They're in the shadows. They know my name. They never let go. Her recorder, somehow intact, held a single file, a cacophony of voices, her own among them, chanting her name. She staggered back to Dunhaven, but the town felt different. The locals wouldn't meet her eyes. Tom, the bartender, served her in silence, his hands trembling. When she left, she found a new carving on the cliffwalk's entrance, a figure with her face, its hollow eyes watching. That night, the whispers followed her, not from the cliff but from within. She didn't sleep. She couldn't. The shadows were waiting. Weeks later, the Coastal Herald ran a story about another disappearance on the cliffwalk. Clara Vance, last seen with a notebook and a recorder. The locals added her name to their warnings, but the cliffwalk remained open, its shadows hungry. At night, the wind carried a new name, and the whispering drop listened. Rory 3, The Hollow in the Mist. In the fog where shadows hum, a black box waits, its hunger vast and old, calling to those who stray too far from light. The fog came to Blackthorn without warning, a creeping tide that swallowed the village whole. It wasn't the gentle mist of autumn mornings, but a dense, gray wall that clung to the skin, heavy with the scent of damp earth and something sour, like rot left to fester. For 3 days, it pressed against windows, seeped under doors, and choked the narrow streets, muffling sound until even the church bell sounded like a whisper. The villagers, superstitious by nature, locked themselves inside, speaking in hushed tones of old tale stories of a fog that wasn't just weather, but a herald of something older, something that fed. Mira, 17 and restless, had never put stock in such tales. She was a wanderer, always chasing the edges of Blackthorn where the marsh began, where the ground turned soft and the air grew thick. Her mother called her reckless, her friends brave. Mira just thought she was curious. On the 3rd day of the fog, that curiosity led her to the marsh's edge, where the reeds whispered and the water gleamed like oil. There, half buried in the mud, she found the box. It was small, no larger than a loaf of bread, carved from a wood so black it seemed to pull light into itself. Its surface was etched with symbol spirals and jagged lines that didn't belong to any language she knew. They twisted under her gaze, making her eyes sting and her head throb. The box wasn't silent. It hummed, not a sound but a vibration that crawled up her arms, settling in her bones like a second pulse. She knelt, mud soaking her knees, and brushed her fingers across its surface. It was cold, colder than the damp air around it, and the hum grew sharper like a warning. She should have walked away. Every instinct screamed it, run, leave it, forget it. But Mira's curiosity was a beast of its own. She pried at the lid, expecting resistance, a lock, or rusted hinges. Instead, it opened with a sigh, smooth as if it had been waiting for her touch. Inside was darkness, not emptiness, but a depth that seemed impossible, like staring into a chasm that stretched beyond the world. The air shimmered, and for a heartbeat, she saw something move inside, limbs too long, eyes too many, a shape that didn't fit the rules of flesh. She slammed the lid shut, her breath catching, the hum now a pulse in her skull, whispering fragments of words she couldn't grasp. Mira stumbled home, the box clutched to her chest, her hands refusing to let it go. She hid it under her bed, telling herself she'd deal with it tomorrow, when the fog cleared and her head stopped spinning. But the fog didn't clear, and that night the dreams began. They weren't her dreams. She saw Blackthorn from above, its crooked rooftops drowning in fog, but the village was wrong. Streets twisted into spirals that led nowhere. Houses pulsed like beating hearts, their windows blinking like eyes. Shadows moved in the mist, not human, not animal, but something else, shapes that bent and stretched, their edges fraying into the fog. At the center of it all was the box, its lid open, spilling shadows that slithered into the world, hungry and endless. Mira woke gasping, her hands trembling, the hum louder now, a chorus in her head. By morning, the village had changed. Her mother stood at the kitchen window, staring into the fog, her eyes glassy, muttering about a sound she couldn't shake. Mira's younger brother, Tom, was no better, rocking in his chair, humming a tuneless song. By noon, half of Blackthorn was the same people standing still, faces blank, whispering about a hum that wouldn't stop. Mira checked the box under her bed. It was still there, its symbols seeming to shift when she wasn't looking directly at them. That evening, Old Man Harrow disappeared. He'd been fishing by the marsh, a habit he refused to break despite the fog. His pole was found in the mud, the line snapped clean, as if something had yanked it with impossible force. No one spoke of searching for him. The fog felt too alive now, too watchful. Mira's guilt gnawed at her. She hadn't told anyone about the box, hadn't admitted what she'd found. She tried to get rid of it that night, sneaking into the backyard with a shovel. She dug until her hands blistered, but the earth rejected the box. Each time she buried it, the soil seemed to spit it back, the box sitting atop the dirt, untouched. She tried burning it in the fireplace, but the flames curled away, refusing to touch it. In desperation, she hurled it into the marsh, watching it sink into the black water. By dawn, it was back on her doorstep, clean of mud, its hum now a low growl. The fog grew thicker, the village quieter. People stopped leaving their homes. Those who did vanished. Mira's best friend, Leela, was next. She'd gone to check her chickens, promising to be quick. Hours passed, and Mira found only Leela's shoe by the marsh, the leather torn, claw marks raking the sole. The hum was everywhere now, a pulse that made the air heavy, like breathing through a wet rag. Mira's dreams grew worse, showing her not just Blackthorn, but a place beyond a void where light didn't exist, where things with too many limbs crawled over each other, their eyes glowing like dying stars. The box was there, always, its lid open, a doorway to that place. It didn't just want to be opened, it wanted to be fed. On the fourth night, Mira went to the church, the last place in Blackthorn that felt untouched by the fog's weight. Father Elias, the priest, was old and frail, his hands trembling as he lit candles that barely pierced the gloom. When Mira showed him the box, he staggered back, crossing himself, his voice a rasp. Those symbols. He said they're a seal, something ancient, something wrong, locked away long before this village was built. He spoke of a fog that came every century, a veil between worlds, thinning until things could cross over. The box, he said, was a key, and opening it had weakened the seal. He begged her to destroy it, but when she asked how, his eyes went blank, and he began to hum, the same tuneless drone as the others. Mira ran, the fog chasing her, curling around her ankles like cold fingers. Blackthorn was no longer itself. Streets bent into impossible angles. Houses loomed like beasts, their windows dark but watching. She heard screams, or maybe it was the hum, twisting into something alive, something that knew her name. The box grew heavier in her arms, its surface warm now, pulsing like a heart. She reached the marsh, the only place left to go. The fog was thickest here, a wall of white that swallowed her whole. She couldn't see her hands, her feet, only felt the box, felt its wanting. She didn't choose to open it. Her hands moved on their own, the lid swinging wide with a sound like a scream torn from the earth. The hum became a roar, and something came out, not a creature, not a shape, but a wrongness. It poured into the fog, and the world broke. The marsh split, the ground opening into jagged mouths lined with teeth that weren't teeth. The air screamed, a sound that clawed at her mind. Shadows surged from the box, not just one but many, their forms flickering, limbs bending backward, eyes blinking in places eyes shouldn't be. They didn't attack her. They didn't need to. They were the fog now, the village, the world. Mira tried to run, but her legs were rooted, her body no longer her own. The box fell, and the fog rushed in, not to blind her but to take her. She felt herself unraveling, her thoughts dissolving into the hum, her body stretching into the void. The last thing she saw was the box, its lid closing on its own, the symbols glowing faintly as if satisfied. When morning came, the fog was gone. So was Blackthorn. The marsh stretched flat and silent under a gray sky. No trace of houses, no sign of life. No one came to look for the village. No one remembered it existed. In the mud, half buried, sat a small black box, its surface gleaming, its hum soft but waiting. The next wanderer would come, as they always did, drawn by curiosity, by the promise of a mystery too dangerous to leave alone.